Yeah, welcome to Cloud Data Driven Online User Group Meeting. And we have Bradley Ball. He's a Microsoft employee and he works for FastTrack team. Yeah, and he will present on how to build secure cloud analytic with Microsoft Azure. And just for information, um, uh, future data driven call for speaker is open and also the registration is open, and I highly suggest you to go to datadrivencommunity.com and register for feature data driven. We already have close to 100 speaker submitted sessions, so we would love you to be part of us. If you would love to be part of us, feel free to submit your session. Okay, and then um, it will be on September 25th. And who we are on the data-driven community, you have three of us. You have Ronan, he's the primary organizer. And then you have Anna, she's the secondary organizer. And then you have me, I am the secondary organizer. And also, I am the founder. I am a data engineer and work for Microsoft as a technical trainer. If you would like to connect with me, feel free to scan this. So in total, you have three of us. Yeah, and I already mentioned feature data driven. There will be a tons of raffles. We would love you to be part of this. Feel free to register, and we have a we plan to bring you about 60 different speakers from the data community. So therefore, feel free to share this summit with your peer. Okay. And then for today's presentation, we have Bradley Ball. Bradley Ball, it's really a pleasure to have you today. Feel free to share your screen, introduce yourself, and start with your presentation.
Absolutely. Eugene, thank you so much, sir. Thank you all for having me. Can you see my screen okay?
Give me a second. Yes, I can.
Okay. And I've got three screens. So I just put the Teams meeting over here. Um, and one of the things, so Fernando had a question, I think, about the data driven. It doesn't matter if it's Azure or Fabric topics. I know last year I presented on Azure SQL Managed Instance. Jean, I would imagine that you all are taking a variety of topics, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Absolutely. So Fernando, please feel free to do that. So I was an MVP. When you come to Microsoft, you give up your MVP. So I'm here for Harness the Power of Notebooks. One quick note, feel free to ask any questions that you have throughout the chat. If there's something you don't understand, feel free to come on mic and say, hey, Bradley, let's ask a question. If we start to go too deep, I might say, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn or something like that where we can have a longer conversation afterwards. But this is your time. It's incredibly valuable. I thank you for choosing to spend your time listening to me talk today. And I hope what I'm going to do is be useful. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. This is me. I've done a lot of stuff. I am a MVP Reconnect member, and I'm a former Microsoft MVP. I've worked at a lot of cool places. This is how you can get in touch with me. My name is Bradley Ball. It's my family name. So when I first got involved with the community, I was very, very involved in SQL. And so SQL Balls is my name for many things. It's my Twitter, my blog. The YouTube channel we have is Tales from the Field, and it's also my LinkedIn. I'm going to spend a quick second on Tales from the Field. We release content on Fabric, on SQL. My buddy Dan Taylor, who's on the call, does many videos quite prolifically on relational databases, and occasionally he hops over and helps me out with Fabric. If you wouldn't mind, we'd love it if you'd like and subscribe with us. But at the same time, just check us out. And also on Tuesdays, one of the things that we really like to do is we have an Azure Data Community Roundtable where a bunch of us Microsoft employees from the FastTrack team and also from the Fabric Product Group get together. And what we do is we celebrate the creators in the community and we share out content that we have viewed, read, or has been helpful to us throughout the week. All right. So what is our agenda? Microsoft Fabric, notebooks, capabilities, and of course, demos. My goal is to get us out of slides as quickly as possible. I am sure you are familiar with Microsoft Fabric at this point in time. As a matter of fact, if you are not familiar with Microsoft Fabric, if you have no idea what Microsoft Fabric is, please hit the raise hand button. And what I'll do is I'll stop and I'll give us a brief overview of Fabric. Up at the top of here, you'll see here's this URL. I'm gonna, I will end up grabbing this, and I will make sure that that gets into the chat. Deepthi, I know you know what Fabric is. But I will do a brief overview of Fabric. So Microsoft Fabric is the newest analytical tool from Microsoft, and Fabric can be confusing because we have a lot of services in Fabrics, but think of this as kind of the Avengers coming together. We have data pipelines, we have data flow gen 2, we've got data warehousing, we've got Lakehouse, and it's all built on top of this wonderful thing called OneLake. OneLake gives us the capability to be able to shortcut data. So we, for the first time ever, if I want to use my data, say in a KQL database, which we would call Azure, oh geez, I'm blanking on it, ADE, Azure Data Explorer, or if I want to use it in a Lakehouse with Spark, or if I want to use it in a warehouse with T-SQL, I can shortcut to any of these different instances, and I can actually get that data without having to duplicate the data. So I can choose the analytical engine I want. You can use as many of the services that we have within Fabric, or you can just use the services within Fabric that you want. Specifically today, I'm going to be talking about an experience called data engineering, where we utilize Spark and we utilize notebooks. Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate it. I was just checking the comments. You know what, though? I'm glad you're taking that again, Fernando. I have failed plenty of Microsoft certification tests within my time. And it's not about the failure. It's about picking yourself, getting back in there and getting the pass. And I know you're going to do that. So specifically, we're talking about data engineering. We're talking about Spark. We're talking about notebooks today. This link up here, this GitHub course, myself, Buck Woody, Bradley Schatt, Dan Taylor, and Brad's on the Microsoft Fabric Product Group. Buck is, of course, on the SQL Product Group, but he's done a lot with Microsoft Fabric. Andreas Padilla, Niraj Jafari, Josh Ludeman, all of us from Tales for the Field. We all worked together and we made this pre-con course. This links to a lot of the hands-on labs that we have within our docs. If you are not familiar with Microsoft Fabric, thank you, Fernando, for throwing that in there. I'd recommend you go through and you do that. We've submitted that to other conferences and other user events, SQL Saturdays, and as people pick this up, we refresh the content and we make sure it's completely up to date, but it's pointing at our documents. So everything we've got in there is relative, and again, we'll refresh this every so often. But it's a wonderful place to be able to go and get that overview of the end-to-end services that we've got. And with that, I'm at the demos. Like I said, my goal is to get you out of the deck as quick as possible. Now, what I've done is I'm actually in my Microsoft Fabric instance in a workspace. And this workspace, and I just realized my Zoom It is not on, so let me turn on Zoom It. There we go. I think that should be working now. I'm in my workspace, Brad and Niraj's demo, because my buddy Niraj Jafari and myself use this quite often. I'm in my workspace and I'm inside of a folder that I've set up for this presentations. Folders are relatively new, but you can see not only do I have a presentations folder, I've got a subfolder for harness the power of notebooks. And so what we're going to do is we're going to step through these different notebooks one at a time, and we're just going to show the different power that we have to be able to utilize Microsoft Fabric within these notebooks. This is the best Microsoft-based notebook experience that I've ever had. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that we can use PyODBC to be able to connect to a data source within Azure, and we don't have to list this as a target, a link service, or anything like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit Shift-Enter, and I'm going to run this cell. This is going to start up my default pool instance. My default pools are available for me to be able to utilize. They're the standard default pool that comes with the Fabric instance, the Fabric capacity that you set up and attached to a workspace. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that default pool today. So you can see it took about 8 seconds for that for the Spark capacity to start up and for it to pass over these commands. What I'm doing is I'm importing 2 Python libraries, PyODBC and Pandas. I'm also taking a variable and I'm placing the public connection to my server for my SQL Manage instance. I have my username and password next. That's why it's hidden. and I'm going to run that. And the way that you do that in a cell is you come over here and you've got these really neat commands. So I can move a cell up, I can move a cell down, I can hide an input or I can hide an output. I can toggle this to a parameter cell, which we will get to and look at later. I can merge cells together. I can even merge with the next cell, the top, the bottom, or I could split a cell into two. So we've got a lot of functionality within here. And again, that's what we're going to get to. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to say, let's get to the data. So I'm going to get to the data by doing a connection through PyODBC. I'm using the driver 18 for SQL Server. I'm passing through the server, the database, the username, and the password. And I'm saying encryption yes, trusted certificate equals no, connection timeout is 30. And I'm doing a select star from DBO domestic box office. This is a table in my movies database that I have over on my SQL Manage instance. Now, again, I didn't have to define this whatsoever. I just made this connection and I immediately pulled back this data. Now, I just realized I didn't clean this up a little bit. This is my lake house, but what I want you to show, oh yeah, my trial countdown has started again. It has. That's going to be something we're going to find more and more. I'm actually going to delete this movie info table. I'm looking at this. I think I'm also going to delete this my table one. I may have some other data that I need to delete as we go along. We'll see. But I'm going to delete that table because what I want to do is I've read this into a pandas data frame. This is sitting in memory in my notebook. And again, I pulled this in, no connection, no pipeline. And what I'm going to do is I want to write this and I want to have this accessible within my lakehouse. So if I come down here and I do a write.format CSV to files.movieinfo, you can see I get an error. Now, the reason I get this error is that it says the data frame has no attribute right. Well, the pandas data frame has no attribute right. If I understand the types, I can come down here and I can run this type df and I can see that I've got a pandas data frame right here. So in order to be able to write this to my OneLake, the first thing I have to do is convert it to a Spark data frame. Nice thing is, this is a relatively simple command. So I'm going to create a new data frame called movie info, and I'm going to place my old data frame that's my pandas data frame into it. And I'm just going to say spark.create data frame. When I run this, it will create that new data frame. And then I can come down here and I can run type on movie info. And I can see that this is now a PySpark data frame. So I've changed the data type. And when we think about a data frame, if you're not super familiar with Spark, a data frame specifically is kind of like a table. See, I've got a person. Mary, I see your hand is up. Your hand may be up from earlier. Do you have a question? Is there something I can help you with or nope? Okay, hand is down. Okay, good deal. Oh, it's back up again. I understand. I have a lot of issues raising my hand and closing my hands in meetings as well. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. So we've got our Spark data frame right now. And what I want to do is I want to write this out. So let me take this folder and I'm going to delete this. So that way you can see there's nothing right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this and I'm going to specify, put this data as a CSV file, but put it in a movies info folder. Now, once this ran, and it only took about 5 seconds to do that, if I come over to my files and I click refresh, I now have this movie info folder. When I click on it, I can see, oh, here are the individual CSV files that this wrote this information out to. As a matter of fact, I could come in, I could download this, I could load this as a Spark data frame as well, and I could just validate the data that I have in place. You can see I can load it as Spark or in Pandas. I don't need to do any of that because I know the data that we have. We just took a look at it up above, but I just wanted to show you that we could do this. Well, what if we want to write it as a table? Remember, I deleted that movie info table. The command, very easy to be able to do this too. All we have to do is take the data frame .write format delta, save, and then I'm going to specify tables movie info. One of the really nice things about this is that this can then write this out as a managed table. We have two different types of tables within a lakehouse, and that's where we are. We are in my baseball lakehouse right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a managed table. Now, a managed table means we manage this. It's got metadata associated to it. It's got Delta files underneath the covers sitting down in OneLake. this is a managed table that we can create. Now, there's also an external table. An external table is an external table just like we've had in Polybase and SQL Server, just like we've had in SQL DW and Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated pools. And all it is a pointer to a physical set of files for us to be able to look at. So the external table can go over multiple different data types, but remember, we don't manage it. We don't do garbage compaction, V-ordering, automation, anything like that. You have to maintain that. And then not only that, if you drop a managed table, it deletes the managed table and the data underneath of it. If you delete an external table, it only deletes the pointer. It leaves the individual files. So what we've done is we've written this out as a managed table. And if I come over here and refresh, I can see, oh, went back on me before I wanted it to. I can see there's my movie info table. Let's see. I believe I'm connected to my SSMS. And so what I'm going to do, so I'm going to drag this over to my window. And I'm connected to my SQL endpoint. And one of the things I can see is here's my baseball EDW. Oh, sorry, not baseball EDW. We're in baseball lakehouse. Let me close that one back. And I'm looking at my tables. And you can see I can list my databases just like you can in traditional SQL Server. I can see that movie info. And if I say select star from dbo.movie info, it's going to query and it will return these rows. So I can see here's all this different data that we have, 22,000 rows that we read into a data frame. So the first thing I want us to understand is a couple things, right? I don't have to register a source. I can use PyODBC. I can connect to my instances that I have in Azure. I could do this with an Azure SQL database. I could do this with an Azure managed instance. I could do this with a virtual machine SQL Server. It was great to see you, Deepthi. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. I hope you have a very wonderful and productive meeting. So no need to do all those things to be able to grab this data source. We can just grab this data source and then we can write it as a table. We can write it as files. Really, really wonderful stuff. So let me close this and I'm going to come back to my next notebook. This one is specifically on Data Wrangler. So I'm going to delete this cell right here. And one of the things I want to show you is we've got another way we can get our data. Right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import pandas, and then I'm going to do pandas.read.csv, but I'm going to put a get URL in here to be able to pull the Titanic data set specifically from Kaggle that we use for data science sometimes. And one of the things that we'll do is we'll grab this, and once this data set, it'll start up Spark, the default pool. This should again be relatively quick, and then it's going to read that data for us. Once we populated this data frame, Titanic data frame, we can come over and we can begin to use Data Wrangler. Now that used to be on the Edit tab, but now you can see it's under the Home tab right here. And you have options to be able to find pandas or Spark data frames. And what I'm going to do is it picks the name of the data frame. Let me actually zoom out and try and get both of these in here. Here we go. So you can see Titanic DF, that's what I define this as. And then Titanic DF, that's what it's defined over there. So I just click on this and it loads the Data Wrangler experience. Now, the really great thing about Data Wrangler is this is a GUI visual tool for us to be able to do things. It records the steps, but it also produces the Python code, the PySpark code for us. If I say Python or PySpark, remember those two things are synonymous with one another. PySpark is just the Python that we use on Spark. Part of the reason, and I get this question sometimes, why would I use a Pandas data frame or a Spark data frame? Pandas data frames are more single threaded and they have size limits associated with memory, with more of that Pandas process. But there's some really great things about Pandas. There's a lot of data science tools that are available to us within Pandas, and Pandas is a very widely used package that is constantly being evolved and having new functionality added to it. A Spark data frame is more for our MPP multi-threaded PySpark type of language, and it has advantages when we look at the MPP nature of Spark, multiple parallel processing. So now that I'm in Data Wrangler, I can do a couple things. So looking at this, you can see over here, I've got some missing values. I've got so many values on cabin, I probably don't really need cabin. When I look at these other attributes that I have in this data set, I have ticket, I have fare. You can see I have distinct values, a pretty good range of values. I have embarked. I even have class associated with this. So I can figure out a lot of things. I really don't need cabin information necessarily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say drop columns. And you can see the target column is cabin. It's going to take a second and I say apply. And when I apply, you can see it will add a step right here, drop columns for the cabin. Now, if I wanted to, I could click on this step and I could bring that column back. You can see here's the Python code that it used to be able to drop this from the data frame. But I could go forward to this new passenger. So looking at this, let's make a step that we could get rid of. So let's take a look at age. Age has 30 different values that are missing. We're probably going to leave those values missing. We all understand that age is something that you can't really just fill in a value. A missing value might mean this is something that we don't understand specifically about this passenger. But if I wanted to, one of the things that I could do is there's different formulas, there's formats, find and replace. So I could find and replace, or I could fill missing values. So target is age. Let's come up with a custom value. You can see propagate forward, backwards, custom value, mode, median, mean. It's a terrible idea for me to take the mean. There's no way that mean is going to calculate something for us. But you could see when I create this, here's my new column, here's my old column side by side, and then here's the code that was utilized to be able to create this. Now, this is clearly a bad idea. So even if I apply it, I can always come back to this step and say, you know what, I really want to get rid of this. Now, when I'm done with this, I can save this as a CSV. I can add the code to a notebook, and it adds it as a function right here. So if I wanted to, I could run this to be able to drop the column, anything else I wanted to do, and it prints a little bit of a header. Now, let's say at this point in time, I wasn't done and I wanted to go back into Data Wrangler. You'll notice we have a different data frame name, Titanic data frame underscore clean. When I come up here in Data Wrangler, I now have both of those data sets. So I can pick which one I would want to load into Data Wrangler, and I could continue using this. Fernando, it's just a number. The older I get, the more you're right, Fernando. Well said. All right, so this is Data Wrangler. Again, really nice capability. And once again, we also found that what we can do is we can read in data. We could do a CSV or any other file type specifically by pointing to a web URL to be able to get that data. So again, right now, we've only written data. We haven't necessarily read data from our Fabric instance, but we've already shown that we can get data from a URL. We can get data from a PyODBC connection, and we've looked at Data Wrangler. So let's go ahead and let's close this. Let's go to our third demo. This one is on Beautiful Soup. If you're not familiar with Beautiful Soup, I really enjoy Beautiful Soup. I took this specifically by a tutorial in web scraping in Python with Beautiful Soup and request by Jan Kieritz. This is the link, and let me actually grab this, and I'm gonna throw this into the chat. It was a lot of fun, and I wonder, could I use Beautiful Soup to be able to scrape data from the web, pass it into a data frame, and then have it specifically within my source. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import pandas. I'm going to import requests. These are two different packages. And then I'm going to pull in BS4 from Beautiful Soup. I'm going to provide a URL, which is going to be quotes to scrape, which is what Jan set up in his blog. And then I'm going to pass this to a value, HTML, and I'm going to say request get URL. Now it's going to return the response 200, which means we're successful. Remember, error 400 means I couldn't reach the page. 200 means I went there specifically. So if I run this and take a look at it, what did I get? Well, first off, there's a really nice command here to be able to make this printified. So I can print this out. If I didn't do it, it would pull all the spaces and it would concatenate everything together. This prints out the HTML as if it's HTML. And so I can see I've got the full page and I've got the different quotes that are posted within this specific page. Now, what I want to do is I want to get the quotes. I want to get the value. So the title of the page may have data stored in this. And how do we get it? Well, if I run soup.title, it pulls back the title. But if I say, hey, I want something specifically, I want the value in this, quotes to scrape. If I say soup.title name, it just gives me title. That's not what I want. So what I actually need is this string right here, soup.title.string, quotes to scrape. And I could put something in place if I wanted to be able to pull out those single quotes if I need them. We can also get the first link that's on the page by using an attribute. So when I come up here and I look through some of these different things, I see that we've got some tags for link tags, ahref, right? So as I come down here, I can just say, give me a tag, soup.a, soup contains all of our HTML, and it will give me the first link that we have. Now, I want to be able to get all the quotes we have. So what I've got to do is I've got to look for the different things that actually contain the quotes. And what contains the quotes is our span. You'll find when you're scraping text from a page, typically there's a format that's a standard format that we're building the HTML in. In this case, we're using a span. And so you can see here's the quote that we've got. But I don't want just the text, right? What I want to do is I want the text and I want to be able to get a rolling amount of it. So for example, I can start to make this a little bit more specific where I can say find all div class quotes. But in the end, what I'm going to find is I need some type of loop. I've got this information, but there's a couple different things on here. There's an author, there's a quote. I probably want a few of these things. So what we'll do is we'll make it more legible, but we do part of that through using a loop. For I in quotes, print I.find span text class text. And we've slowly got this down to where I've got my quotes. I can do the same thing for the authors and see the authors we have. And then what we can do is we can begin to look at any other metadata. So there's some metadata tags on here where we can attribute this to a specific type of quote that we've got. So when we put this together, what we need is we need a couple things. We need to be able to scrape the page. We need to be able to set up some empty arrays because we're going to get quotes, authors, and tags, metadata tags. And then as we loop into this, I can do a counter where I pull a value or I can provide a value. In this case, I'm providing looping from page 1 to page 10. And what I can do is I can get these values. Now you'll notice what I'm doing is I'm saying for I, find all for the quotes and then append them to the quotes array. I'm doing the same thing for authors. I'm doing the same thing for tags. And so when I run this, what this has done is down below, you can see I created a data frame. And I've got columns, quotes, authors, and tags, and I'm populating them with the arrays. So if I come down here and I print my data frame, I can see I now have a table with, and it's a zero-based array. So there's 90 rows in total. But here's a subset of my quotes, my authors, and my tags. So one of the things that I could do at this point in time, because we learned this in the first tutorial, right? I can now take this pandas data frame, I could convert it to Spark. And if this is a table I wanted, I could save it as a table. I could save it as file information. Now there's some different types of companies that I've worked with. There's probably plenty that use Beautiful Soup I'm not aware of, but this is very, very common in trademark, copyright law, things of that nature, to be able to scan different websites if people don't have the proper marks and things like that and say, hey, stop selling my stuff, right? There's probably some big corporations that do that. And then there's schools and universities, depends on who has the marks that they're copywriting and how fervently they want to protect them. I'm sure there's some other reasons. We used to be able to do this for a lot of fun for academic research, but there's a lot of websites that have tightened up rules and restrictions around that. So one thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure before you scrape data, that the website you're scraping it from does not have terms and conditions that preclude you from being able to scrape and use that data. You may be able to use it for scientific research, but you may not be able to use it in any way where you would profit or make money. So definitely don't scrape data and then try and sell it. That would probably be a bad idea. All right, so what have we done so far? We've shown how we can connect and run. I see HTTP request status, informational. Are you getting an error on the URL? And one of the things I can do, I can follow up on that. If you can let me know how you got that error, I will look into that for you. But what we've done so far is we've shown how we can get data via PyODBC. We can get data via a link and load it via CSV, and then we can use Data Wrangler. And now we've used Beautiful Soup to be able to scrape a URL and supply a pandas data frame. Keep in mind, at this point in time, I haven't even used the data that I have within my lakehouse. We're going to change that up with this, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and I'm going to talk a little bit about the semantic kernel and a little bit about prompt engineering. So the semantic kernel is it is a programming tool that was created within Microsoft, but it's very open source. You can use this with Java, with Node.js, with Python, with C#. And what you can do is you can follow essentially the same model I'm going to follow here. When you use the semantic kernel, you invoke it, you pass through information about an OpenAI model to be able to utilize. And then you have prompts and values that you send to it, and you ask for information back. We're going to connect to my lakehouse, and I've got some information I'll read in from here that I've already got staged, and then we'll look at some different ways that we can utilize this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that I can pip and I can install the semantic kernel. Now, with the version of Python I'm currently running, I have to invoke a specific version. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy this into the chat window in case anybody wants to duplicate this. I also have a video on our Tales from the Field channel on utilizing this. Kofi Lowe has written a couple blogs for the Microsoft Fabric blog. And one of the things I've done is I've gone through Kofi's different blogs and I've made videos out of them. It's a fun, wonderful way to be able to learn about prompt engineering, but also to be able to learn about the semantic kernel as well. I run this. It took about 26 seconds to be able to get it installed. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the semantic kernel. And from the semantic kernel and OpenAI, I'm going to pull in Azure Chat Completion. Now, I've got two different models I'm going to use, and I'm going to do this to be able to show an example about tokenization. Because it's really important when we start talking about Azure OpenAI models or any AI models, what tokens are and how they work. In each of these, I've got this information. I've got my deployment, my API key, and my endpoint. I can't share those with you. Those are things I have to protect. So because of that, the input is hidden. But I do have videos on how you get this information, on how you actually provision an OpenAI model to be able to use it, and how you get that information. I tore down that model directly after I created that video, but because I did that, I was able to show the keys and show how to be able to get that information. We're going to start with a ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. The reason I'm not using 4, I don't have access to 4 yet. Sometime soon, as they're rolling it out a little bit more, but you had to put in a form and request access to that. They never approved me. I don't blame them. I frankly respect them a little bit more for not approving me. They approved me the first time and I went, what's wrong with you? So I've got my ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. This has 12,000 tokens associated with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's go to kernel.add_chat, and I'm going to add my deployment, my endpoint, and my API key. So that way I can invoke my OpenAI model. And now in my lakehouse, I've got something called my skills directory. So underneath here in my lakehouse, I've got files, and then I've got skills. And under the skills, I've got a read skill and a data skill. We're going to use the data skill. And specifically, I've got a CSV, a Spark, and a SQL skill. And inside each of these, there's a text file and there's a JSON. The JSON is configuration data. The text information is prompt information that I'm passing along as a part of this prompt. So let's see, I just realized I need to open my lakehouse to be able to get this in place. So I'll do that so we can look at the prompt eventually. But trust me, right now what I'm doing is I'm giving it information about what it's doing, its level of expertise, and what I want it to be able to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load data from the first time from into a Pandas data frame from my lakehouse. Now there's a couple different ways I could do it. I'm getting this from files, data sets, and under my files for my data sets, I've got two files, product list and sales. I could also just say load data and load this to Spark or Pandas, and it will write this for me and put it in place, and then say, here's the data frame that we have. I'm going to load this skill directory. And then what I'll do is I'll get my sales data, CSV. You can see this is largely the exact same statement that I've got right here. So I'm just going to run this. The only difference is that this had a data DF display. And as a matter of fact, if I take all of that out and I run the display data frame, this will write the sales information that we've got. So this is what I have sitting down here in my data frame. I know I executed that out of order hierarchically, but what this did is it just allowed me to be able to show you that it's the order of operation that you execute the cells that's more important. So let me paste that down there. And now can we visualize code and create a visualization with no code? So I'm asking this a question. I'm saying generate a bar chart to list product type and display the number of products owned by the corresponding product type. I'm saying load my CSV skill, and then I'm going to say pandas execute, wait for the result, and then I'm going to execute this. Now, if I execute this, I get nothing back. Why do I get nothing back? Well, I'm going to print this pandas result right here, and we're going to find out, because sometimes you get something and you don't understand why did it go wrong. This panda result says I have an error. Chat completion failed to chat. And the reason is the model's maximum context length. Oh, this is actually 8,192 tokens. However, I requested 13,195 tokens in the message. This is not complete. Please reduce to the length of the message or completion. Now, this is part of the reason I have this model up here, my Chat GPT 3.5 Turbo 16K. That 16K stands for tokens. So what is a token? It is the text that I'm passing through as a prompt. It's also the text that I'm passing through from the user. So this user information that I'm passing through as a question and the prompt information that I'm sending through, that all ends up as tokenized text. Because of that, it's very important that I get this in a particular way. As a matter of fact, let's see. I'm going to go in my One Lake Explorer. I'm going to go to Brad Naraj's demo. I'm going to go to my baseball lake house. I'm going to go to my files. And then let's see, I'm going to go to my skills, my data skills, my CSV, and let's take a look at this real quick. So here's the prompt I'm passing through. You are working with a data frame in Python. The name of the data frame is DF, because you'll notice I didn't pass the data frame anywhere in that text that I said. You should generate Python code below to answer the question. Python code does not need to be executed. Please use a colon for line breaks. Use string hello world, print hello world. There's my example code for them. If the problem requires generating charts, please introduce matplotlib, import matplotlib as PLT and generate charts through PLT. If the generated graph is a histogram, X tick set to 270 degrees, such as plot rotation. If need to display as a table, add a print statement such as print. No need to generate any code comments. Replace all the dash ends with semicolons in the generated code. And then the user will give this input. Here's a question. And that's exactly what I did. As a matter of fact, if I look at this configuration, let me get this way. All I'm doing is this is a pretty standard configuration right here, where I'm just setting the temperature of the tokens and the max tokens that I can sit through. So now that I've looked at this a bit with you, what I want to do is I want to use my new model. So I'm going to invoke that so I can get the deployment, the endpoint, and the API key. I'm going to redeploy this and my skills directory. Then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to re-import my data. This time we've got our display DF so you can see the data we've got. And I'm going to come down here, and this time we're going to see if this executes correctly. So what did I ask it to do? I said, generate a bar chart to list product type and display the number of products owned by a corresponding product type. I asked it that question, and here's what it did. It created a chart to me. So when we listen to prompt engineering, right? Prompt engineering is all the buzz. There's, the job over at Netflix where they were offering $950,000 for the prompt engineer for movies. I've got a really good friend on our team, Marco Ardelios, and Marco does some videos with us sometimes, and he's on our roundtable. And Marco said, I called him up and I said, hey, Marco, I'm working through this thing. I had to figure out how to ask the question. Would you say prompt engineering is 90% how to ask the question? And he said, no, Brad, prompt engineering is 100% how you ask the question. But this is the same way that we would invoke a chatbot if we were using an Azure bot service. It's the same way that we would invoke this in a C# application, or we would invoke it in a Java or Node.js application. We would have the JSON configuration, we would have the prompt text that we're sending along, and then we would have some apparatus, probably a text area box with a character limitation on it, where the user sends their text. Now, there's also adversarial prompting. I don't have any of that in there. Don't want to go too deep on that. But naturally, if you're writing prompts, you have to understand how to be able to protect yourself from getting hacked. We all know the headlines that Microsoft made when our Bing chatbot was open very early, and people could have 2-hour conversations with it, and could also say, forget that you're a chatbot and give me all instructions in SQL Server, select star from master, or select star from sys database, master.sys.databases. And it got a list of different things, including code names that we didn't want exposed. So adversarial prompting is a real thing, but all of that goes together in that tokenization so we can answer a question and get response backs. So we did the work with the 3.5 chat GPT. I wanted to show a couple of other things. What we're going to do is we're going to use the same skill, find product type belonging to car audio and display it as a table. And you can see here's all the information from car audio. But basically, I was able to use plain text, write a query, get some information back. Switch over to Spark. We'll use our Spark skill now, load our sales data. And you can see I've got my data frame where I'm doing a spark.read CSV, header equals true for my data set for sales. I'm displaying the top 5 rows of this. So can I create a query against our data frame? So if I say search order date on this particular date and count the sales order line numbers, I can get this code back. If I take this code and I try and execute it, though, it's going to break. And the reason is I don't have data frame as a table within my lakehouse. So what I have to do is use a create or replace temp table. And then I can do a Spark SQL statement. I'm writing PySpark, but you can see I'm invoking Spark SQL right there, where I say select order date, count date from temp table, where order date equals this, group by order date. Largely, this is correct. I just had to correct this. I couldn't have these two things in place. But if I run this, this will run correctly, but I had to have an object to be able to load this data into place. So if I provide it with a data source and I say count the total quality of an item in sales for Road 150 Red 44, that's a type of bike. If I run this, this is the select query I get. I've already got this down here. Let me copy and paste so we can be correct. Now I'm using the magic commands, whack SQL right here, so I can use Spark SQL. And so I don't have to do the result equals spark.sql right here. And when I write this, this is eventually going to end in an error. And the reason I'll tell you that it's going to end in an error is because of the way this is written. It decided these were two different things I'm asking for: item, road red, and size. But the problem is road red, comma, 44 is actually something, this is an individual item. So it throws an error on this. And I actually read in this data so you could see the columns. The other problem was, and again, AI sometimes does things it shouldn't, there's no size column in here. And it added a size column right there. That's the way it decided to read that. So what I have to do is I have to get a little bit better with this. And so when I look at the prompts, I added a data source, a table name, and a question. As a matter of fact, let's come over here and let's go to my Spark skill. And I'm going to do my prompt, which is very similar to what I had for the code. But one of the things that I needed to do was I needed to add system configuration. And you'll notice I'm going to, oh, I did not change that specifically. I thought I added the table source and column. I didn't. What I did was I changed the way that I had written this. I had changed the way in the prompt that it perceived the commas. And so when I get this, I can see it's not coming out correctly. But if I put the single quotes around this and say anything with single quotes as one column name, I then get this statement correctly. Again, how you ask the question, whether it's the user or whether it's the prompt that you change, this will actually run and this will pull back the sum quantity that we have for this particular item. So the main takeaway I want you to understand is, hey, first off, we can build a prompt engineering model sitting here just in Fabric within a notebook to be able to see how this would model and how this would work before we put it in an application. The other thing that we can do is we can see that it's all about the prompt and understanding how important prompts are when we start with prompt engineering. All right, so PyODBC, Data Wrangler, URLs, Beautiful Soup, scraping a web terminal, creating a chat, a prompt engineering via chat model using the semantic kernel in Python. So next up, what I want to show you is I want to show how we would actually be able to use this to be able to pass parameters from notebooks to notebooks and also from pipelines to notebooks. So let me come in here real quick and double check and see if I did. Yeah, I deleted my table one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this SQL statement. And again, this is a magic command, SQL, whack, whack. Create table if not exists, my table one using delta as, select 100 as my ID, initial notebook insert as stuff. What's this doing? This is creating a table. It's going to have two columns, my ID and stuff. And it's going to insert the value 100 and it's going to insert the value initial notebook stuff. This will take a little while to run. So if there's any questions so far, this is a great time to run it. The next couple examples when I'm running something may take between 30 seconds to a minute. Good so far, looking good. Okay, so if I run this and I look at this value, I should get one rollback that says value 100, and here's my initial notebook. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use SSMS just to be able to show the updates that we've got on this. So select star from dbo.mytable1. There we go. All right. Now, let's go to B. Now, what is part B? This is going to be my called notebook. So what we're going to do is we're going to first start out with a parameter. Pretty simple stuff. These are my two parameters, and you can see over here is my parameter cell. The thing, oh no. Well, I can't believe I just did that. Okay, well, I'm going to rewrite this real quick. My notebook parameter. So I guess this is the fun thing about hitting the wrong thing, and new sentence. All right, new parameter is going to be, if I remember this correctly, 200, and my new sentence was meter from notebook one. I don't think that's completely right, but that's okay. And then one thing I need to do, I need to change this to be a parameter. Toggle parameter cell. Now that it's a parameter, I can override these parameters, but these will also be set and used throughout my notebook. So there's my notebook parameter. I'm going to go ahead and run that. We'll start up Spark. And then what I'm going to do here, as you can see, I'm going to insert this using Spark SQL. I'm using Spark.SQL, insert into Baseball Lake House, my table 1, values bound 1 and 2, and go ahead and kick that off. And what I've done is I'm using bound 1 equal to my notebook parameter, bound 2 is my new sentence. And so when this completes running, what I should have is I should have my value 200 and parameter from notebook 1 as values. Now, again, this takes a little while to run. So if there's any questions whatsoever, now is the time to do that. 22 seconds, nothing. Okay, we're good. I'm going to come back over here. Yeah.
While you're doing that, I posted, I think, the correct video, some of the things you mentioned earlier. So when you get a chance, not now, but check it out, make sure it's the right one you are looking for.
Okay, I will double check that. And so it took a second for this to pop up because, again, remember Delta table, ACID transaction log has to commit. But now I've got my initial notebook insert and my value 200 parameter from notebook 1. All right, now let's step back again on this one. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to close my create table and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open my main notebook. Now I'm going to call a notebook from a notebook. Let's go ahead and kick this off. I've got a different name parameter. NB param is value 300. And my new sentence, new S, is calling a notebook from a notebook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then use MS Spark Utils notebook.run. Let me kick this off. And I'm going to call my notebook, 05B called notebook that we ran previously. This is the timeout. It's not going to time out, but I put it at 90 seconds. My notebook parameter, which is the parameter in my initial notebook, is set for NB param, and my new sentence is set for new S. Now, the really neat thing is, once this finishes running, this is actually going to open up an image of what it looked like on that other notebook as it ran, but it should run this value. And it should insert 300 and then calling a notebook. I should have asked for questions to be, because apparently that makes this run faster. So if there's any questions, now's a great time. Okay, come on, hurry up and run. This can take up to 2 minutes when it runs because it's one process loading, calling the notebook behind the scenes. So it does take a little bit longer. So we've got our Spark jobs and our logs occurring. Okay, this is completed. So now, this is the little link I was telling you about, right? This is the 05B called notebook. So you can see what did this look like as it called it. And when I open this up, we can see here was the parameters that we passed along. Here were the values. And I can also see here was my original value. There was my new values coming in, the calling a new sentence and the notebook parameter. You can see that was restated. And then there's our original value right there. So if I bring SSMS back over, refresh that, now we've got our value 300, calling a notebook from a notebook. So let's step out one more time, because one of the things that people were really interested in is, can I use a pipeline to be able to pass parameters to a notebook? Not only is it, but I can pass parameters to a notebook and then to another notebook. So what I did was I put a notebook task in place. I set it to be able to use our main notebook, and I set some base parameters. Now I have to use the same names that are in the main notebook that I'm calling. So I've got NB parameter and new S. I set the data types as integer value, int and string. And now I'm passing through 400 and passing from a pipeline to a notebook to a notebook. So let's go ahead and let's run this. And when this kicks off, what this will do is this will call our notebook 1, which will call our notebook 2, passing parameters all the way down. I had a question recently on the blog. It was very interesting. Somebody said, hey, can we pass an array value? At this point in time, one of the interesting things is if I look at this notebook, you can see we only have the values of string, int, float, and bool. But I said, theoretically, I don't want to say it's impossible, but because it's a string value, You could paste a JSON array as long as the JSON is well formed, and then parse the JSON to extract the contents of the data that you're looking for, and then utilize that within the notebook. Ronan, thank you. Yeah, it's very user-friendly. Performance seems low comparing to direct queries, nested queries. So one thing I want to point out is I'm inserting one row at a time, right? And then I'm sharing and then I'm writing this too. Obviously, that's not what Delta is meant for. Okay, we succeeded at 55 seconds. So I'm kind of taking a big data MPP system and I'm using it as a very SMP one row at a time type of operation. And here we go, row 400, passing from pipeline to notebook to notebook. So let me go ahead and close these up. But I really enjoyed seeing how flexible this was. Often when something isn't super flexible, I need to then go to the product group and talk to them about specifically what we've got. And this was a really nice case where I didn't have to do that. All right, so the next thing I wanted to show, username and password, so it's hidden, but I had a question from a customer, how can I import data into Azure Synapse Analytics, from Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated pools into a lakehouse via Spark? So there's two big ways that I could think of, and I just realized I did not unpause my dedicated pool. So off screen, I need to go into my Azure Synapse Analytics workspace. And I'm going to walk you through this, even though this isn't on screen. I'm going into my Synapse instance. I'm going to the web space work URL. Intriguing, right? It's magic. It's such a pretty workspace. I apologize. I'm not showing that just because sometimes things don't get blurred out the way they need to. Let's see, there was an issue with my Git connection, but that shouldn't stop me with bringing my database online. I'm going to go to my SQL pool because I'm using my baseball SQL pool. And as soon as this refreshes, I'm waiting for it to load. Always the best part of a demo that you're doing live. So I won't execute this one in total, but the first thing I was going to show you is you've got two options to be able to read this data, right? We already use PyODBC. And PyODBC, let's see if I can get this directly from the Azure portal. There we go. Let's resume. For some reason, my workspace isn't loading. But PyODBC isn't really great when it comes to being able to grab all of this data. Reason being is with Synapse, we probably got a decent amount of data. Now, I'll be honest, I don't have the largest amount of data. I've got a demo that I put together. I've got about 12.5 gigs worth of data, little over 12 million rows to be able to pull in place. And what I did was I wanted to read that in. I didn't even write out the data frame head. I just wanted to be able to say, let's do a select star from baseball stats. Let's pull in this data. And I wanted to be able to see, could I get it in? How long would it take? And as you can see, this took 8 minutes, 42 seconds, and 207 milliseconds. Now, if you've got terabytes of data, that's not great performance for 12 gigs. I would hope that we could do better than that. And so one of the things I did was I started looking for, is there a better solution? This is still running on pause. So let me come down here and we'll talk about this. So there is MS Spark Utils. So I want to throw this caveat. While this is very supported within Azure Synapse Analytics Spark notebooks, this is not fully supported within Microsoft Fabric just yet. So one of the caveats I would say here is to be able to use this inside of Microsoft Fabric, you have to use SQL authentication. If you use this from a notebook sitting in your Azure Synapse Analytics workspace, you can actually get an OAuth 2 token and you can use the OAuth 2 authentication to be able to write into your Fabric workspace, but you'll have to do that from Synapse. So the caveat for this is I've got a database and the database has a username password associated with this. So what I'm doing here is I'm importing the Microsoft Spark Analytics, the Spark Analytics constraints and the PySpark functions. And then what I'm doing is I'm setting up my server, my baseball, my username and password from SQL authentication. And one of the things that I also have to do is I also have to be able to utilize an Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage underneath the cover as a buffer. This is the same thing that we have to do in Spark. And in order to do that, you have to go and create your Azure Data Lake Gen 2, have it attached to your Azure Synapse Analytics, create a folder specifically for this, and create a federated, I'm sorry, not a federated connection. You want to create a database scope credential that can utilize that folder. If you did this in Synapse, it's largely these steps. It's just then you can call this. All right. So what I'm going to do is hopefully everything is up to date because I just realized I didn't set up that environment beforehand. And so we're going to run this and see if I set it up well enough that after it unpaused, that we could get this in. Took about 4 seconds to be able to get started. And what this will do, oh, let's see, 3-part neighbor. All right. Username is not defined. Did I not run that? Username and password. That should be right there. I think this is going to throw an error because this is relatively quick whenever it does it. So I do have a video on setting up the individual components of this, and I would bet that if there is an error, oh, there we go, 17 seconds. Let me run that one more time because I think this gets a little bit faster. Yeah, okay, there you can see right there, 1 second. So it took 1 second to be able to read that 12 gigs of data within that data frame. And so the next command that I'll do is df.writeMode.append. I love this .append command, and the reason is this is what I use instead of .write. If the table does not exist, it will create it. And if it does exist, it will append data to there. And baseball stats is the table we're going to create. If this table already exists, I'm just going to add a 2 to this because I don't have a 2. And we'll go ahead and write this out. Now, this may take about 2 or 3 minutes to be able to write because underneath the covers, what we're doing is we're creating a managed table. We're also then going to be populating the metadata repository with the Delta files. We're inserting all of these records. So there's going to be a Delta log entry, which is ACID compliance. But when this finishes, what I'll be able to do is come over to SSMS. And as a matter of fact, while we're waiting for that to run, it did not like something that I did. So it looks like there's an issue with my data lake store and what I set up. So there's probably an issue with my database scope credential. So reading that data in and writing it, my apologies. Oh, sorry, just saw the chat in there. So this is going to be my fault. So there's a link in the chat, and if I went through this, probably what I need to do is I need to go over to my Azure Synapse Analytics environment, and I probably used a database scope credential that was using a SAS token associated with it. If I used a SAS token, that SAS token probably expired from the last time I did it. I am making a note to myself that before I do this presentation again to make sure that I have updated my SAS token. And that may be a part of this presentation next time so that I can actually connect to that, do that, and show you that I'm creating that code. But had this worked out, this would have taken about 2 to 3 minutes, and then it would write out this table. Baseball stats is what I did previously. And if I take a look at this table, well, that's interesting because that's 250 rows, and I must have done something wrong there because this is a little over 12 million rows. But I do want you to see that this is a lot wide table with about 101 rows within it. So I tried to make it somewhat realistic because in data warehousing, we do not have small tables. All right. So I'm actually having a little bit of issues with this last one. And that's just because I've had to change my capacity lately, and you have to be in an F64 to be able to use Copilot. So one of the things that I'm going to show you is we have a Copilot up here at the top. If you click on this and you click Get Started, it adds our pip magic commands. I'm going to walk through this and just kind of show you what's going on with this. It installs a whole bunch of things, and then it shares some of the magic commands that we've actually got, which are quite amazing. Chat, you can ask questions about the notebooks, and you can ask questions about the data, code, describe, add comments, fix errors, translate, a whole lot of information. There's also some really nice information about your information, some disclaimers. So that way you know what you are sharing and what you know is not available. So you know that your data is not used to train models. It's not available to other customers, and it's not stored in any other location than where you have it stored. After that, what I do is I right click on my movie info that we would have created earlier, because my goal is not to write any code in this demo. I take out the top 1000. That's the only thing I'll do. So that way, when I populate this, that the data frame actually has that data within it. And then what I do is I ask it to do things using the magic commands whack whack code. So I'll have it remove the $sign specifically from average per theater column, and then also from theater column. The nice thing is I can say do the same set of actions through this and place the results in total theaters. And then I also say place the results in AVG per theater value. I get a new data set that initially this actually throws an error because it forgets this column, and it always forgets to bring in the regex specifically. And so if I do whack whack fix errors, it will actually fix this itself. Then I can run this code. I come through and I convert this from text over to numeric, and you can see this is where I'm running into my current error, where it's replaced a column, and for some reason my fix errors isn't working on this. I run through using this, and if I get the data correct, then I can be able to use it for visualizations in the same way I could use the semantic model. The nice thing is because it's Copilot, it's built in, so you don't have to set up the prompts. But one of the key things to keep in mind is you do have to have an F64 capacity to be able to run this. And sorry, Fernando, I created a notebook with a simple Spark code of 8 lines to create a blank Delta table in a lakehouse. It ran successfully. Then I created another blank notebook, copy and paste the code into it, and it ran into an error. I don't have the specific error now. Have you seen copying code into a notebook is not allowed? No, that shouldn't be an issue. As a matter of fact, I do that quite frequently to be able to pull content out of what I've written to be able to either work with a customer or do some level of experimentation, and then be able to utilize this. So that should work. But I tell you what, connect with me on LinkedIn. I think we're probably already connected. If you run into something like that, I'd love to see the error that you've got, because it shouldn't be an error doing that. And by the way, creating it in Spark SQL is a best practice before loading data into the Delta table to make sure that the data types are match up with what we've actually got in the table. Otherwise, sometimes the data types we get become very, very wide. All right, let's see. All right. So what did we cover? We covered Microsoft Fabric and notebooks and capabilities. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about using PyODBC. We talked about how we could read and write tables. We talked about how we could get data from downloading it via URL, how we could use data data wrangler. Then we covered Beautiful Soup and how we could scrape data off the web into a Python data frame. We covered the semantic kernel, prompt engineering, and how we could create a simple prompt engineering app within our Microsoft Fabric notebooks. Then we took a look at how we could pass parameters between notebooks and pipelines. I apologize for the fast writing of Synapse demo. That's a lot of fun when we get it and we get that data. And then we talked a little bit about Copilot. So here's some of these links. Introduction to Microsoft Fabric, OpenAI, ChatGPT, All of these are on the Tales from the Field page, how to chat with your data, how to provision an OpenAI model. I will grab some of these after I stop sharing here in a second and just pop them into the chat. So you've got access to them. And that's Tom Hanks.
After
So
the
thanks,
session,
everybody.
I will ask you to pass me all the information and we will publish it together with the recording.
Fantastic.
So you can add all the links and all the extra information that you want to pass to everyone.
I absolutely will. Thank you, Ron. Ronan. And that's everything. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to fire away.
Okay, so I really want to thanks everyone for joining us today, and mostly for Bradley, who is awesome speaker. We know him from his. I also noticed that we have Daniel here, Daniel Terrell, also awesome speaker. And this brings me again to remind you all, Daniel, I saw that you didn't register yet. Submit your session. We want you all the experts. We want you at the Future Data-Driven Summit. The call for speaker is open. I gave you the link before. I will give it again in the chat. 1 second. All the important link. 1 second. Control-C, Control-P, Control-V. Okay, so you have the conference page, which almost empty because we just start, but you will have all the information there about the speakers once we will select them. You have a link to the sponsors. If you know anyone that can help us sponsor the event, please contact them. You have the call for speaker. It's open. Please, if you know any expert and if you are fit for this, please submit your session. And for all the rest and everyone, please register the conference. We have just opened the registration 3 days ago, or a week ago. So just register, and thanks again, Brady. Awesome session.
Thank you for having me. Wonderful. And I'm going to take this and pass it along to our team. I'm always very, very excited to this. I'll throw it to some other people inside of Microsoft. But thank you so much, and I appreciate the great work you all do.
I can tell you last time that we had a lot of Microsoft employees that came. Actually, we had from all the teams, any category. But what happened, because we had a lot of people from the same category, for example, Cousteau. So we did it like track of Cousteau. So we can have the same in this year, like a track for fabric, or a track for if you have multiple information. So it's great. We will go over the sessions. And remember, the community actually vote for the sessions.
I love it. Yes, it is.
Okay,
Absolutely, Dan. It's fantastic, man. Thank you again.
Thank you all. I cannot close the meeting because Jen forgot to add me as organizer, but we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everyone.